Boris Johnson is set to leave the EU furious next week as he plans to introduce controversial no-deal Brexit legislation, even if a trade agreement is negotiated. On Monday, the House of Commons will reconsider the Internal Market Bill, including 2 clauses which ministers have admitted would break international law. The legislation would break the Brexit withdrawal agreement signed by the UK and EU last year, and Brussels has previously threatened to walk away from trade deal talks if it passes through Parliament. The government has always said the legislation was needed to protect the UK's internal market in the event of a no deal. But today the Prime Minister's spokesman appeared to indicate the controversial clauses would remain in the bill even if an agreement is reached by Michel Barnier and David Frost over the weekend. It was previously assumed the parts of the bill which offended the EU would be removed if a deal was struck. Speaking this afternoon, the Prime Minister's spokesman said, "The clauses represent a legal safety net to protect the integrity of the UK's internal market in the huge gains of the peace process. Of course, we are committed to working in the Joint Committee to find a solution, but we have an obligation to the people of Northern Ireland to ensure they continue to have unfettered access to the UK under all circumstances." In the Brexit divorce deal, agreed last year, the UK and Brussels promised to set up a joint committee which would look at goods travelling from the UK mainland to Northern Ireland and determine which would be at risk of entering the EU's single market. Those goods deemed at risk of crossing into the Republic of Ireland would then be subject to trade tariffs. But the Prime Minister's controversial legislation would allow the UK to unilaterally determine which goods required export declarations. The bill has already passed through the House of Commons once but must now be voted on again after the House of Lords turfed out the clauses on Northern Ireland customs checks. Today the Prime Minister's spokesman refused to rule out the prospect of clauses being reintroduced into the bill on Monday, even if a trade deal was struck over the weekend. The clauses left the EU furious when they were first introduced in the House of Commons in September. Earlier this week, Mr. Barnier told EU 27 ambassadors that the return of the clauses would cause a crisis in relations as there would be a fundamental breakdown in trust between the two sides. Mr. Johnson's intentions to introduce the clauses even if there is a deal will only add to tensions. However, both sides currently remain committed to reaching a trade agreement in the coming days. The EU transition period ends on the 31st of December and any agreement must be ratified in parliaments on both sides before it can come into effect, meaning there are just days left to secure a deal if it is to be in place by January. Mr. Barnier is in London this week as intense negotiations continue. Talks between the two sides continued well past 11 PM last night. The EU chief negotiator also cancelled his Eurostar train back to Brussels this morning to remain in the UK for further talks. Mr. Johnson's spokesman said today, "We are committed to working hard to try and reach agreement with the EU. Talks are ongoing. There are still some issues to overcome. Time is in very short supply and we are at a very difficult point in talks," he added. "What is certain is that we will not be able to agree a deal that does not respect our fundamental principles on sovereignty and taking back control." Negotiations have been gridlocked for months, with neither side willing to give ground to the other. Fishing rights and the so-called level playing field remain the biggest areas of contention.